See this thing up here? This, I don't know how well you can see it. This is a traffic camera. So there's a camera here, and then if we go over here, I don't know if you can see this. This is the flash. So here's the way, in theory, this is supposed to work. If you drive like a complete frickin' moron, the idea is that the camera will take a picture of your plate, and that, I need to cross the street here, that it will take a picture of your plate and have this wonderful handy dandy flash that will make sure that your plate can be seen on the camera, and then the plate is scanned and gone through a database, and then you get a nice big fat ticket in the mail. Now, the thing about these ticket systems, or these camera systems, is the idea that they're supposedly foolproof. Hang on, I can't, oh, there's a tree in the way, so I cannot actually see, but I'm able to cross here. Yeah, so that's great. They're gonna have to get somebody from Public Works up here to fix that. So anyway, it is what it is. I will cross here, I think. It's the wonderful world of Scotiabank where I don't need to go. So anyway, going on about the cameras. The cameras they do two things. By and large, I would say that the traffic cameras, for the most part, work pretty well, but they're not perfect. The way that they work is there's a kill zone. So basically, well, I'm gonna back up a little bit. So basically there's a little accelerometer, intervalometer, and there's stuff in the camera. Not in the camera, but in basically the stuff that is connected to the camera inside that measures your speed. And the way that it does this is, I'm gonna have to not get hit here. No, that's okay. He thinks because I have a camera, I'm not paying attention. So the way that the camera works, the way that the system works, is it basically measures your speed. It's similar with radar, like similar to the way radar works. So the idea is, if you are going at a certain speed, the system measures you and it's able to tell how fast you're going. So in theory, if you're driving like a maniac, it's a way to be able to make sure that nobody's missed if there isn't enough of a police presence, and that you're able to be ticketed, and the idea is it's supposed to act as a form of deterrence. And by and large, it generally works pretty well. But the system isn't perfect, and it also generates a lot of revenue for the cities and the municipalities in which the cameras are set up in. And so you're gonna see a lot of reluctance to either get rid of the camera systems or update them to make sure that the errors that they do make are basically implemented, because, you know, they're a cash cow. And that's okay to some degree if it's fair, right? Because cities and municipalities have to make money somehow. I mean, if you're driving like an idiot and you get a ticket, a portion of that revenue goes to the city, right? So that the roads are maintained, and that basically you don't have shitty roads, and, you know, it all kind of goes in a circle. The problem is the camera systems themselves aren't always perfect. Nothing is, but there aren't a lot of people that want to admit this. And a lot of these systems are made by a company called Redflex. And the problem is the system is proprietary, and a lot of the agreements that they have with the cities over these systems is that you can't actually see the data. Now, the system works generally pretty well if you blow right past a light, right? So if you're going 10, 15, 20 miles an hour over the speed limit, it's gonna be pretty hard to argue when the camera gets you that, no, I wasn't speeding, I shouldn't have to pay the ticket. Where you get difficulties with the system is when you start dealing with the threshold of, you know, a mile or two over, a mile an hour or so over the speed limit. Because the way that the camera systems are set up is that a threshold is programmed into them, and then if you go over that threshold, it basically measures it, triggers it. It says, hey, I see that you are basically speeding, and A picture of your license plate is taken, a flash is triggered if necessary so that the picture of your license plate is clear. It is then sent to a database, which is either run by the contractor that monitors the system. It is then, that information is then sent to the local police department, and then it's basically sworn, so to speak, almost like an affidavit that says, oh, I see the ticket, and then the ticket is mailed to you. And then the expectation is that, oh, now leasing. Well, isn't that very nice? The flag almost killed me. Anyway, so the expectation is that you sped and that you pay the ticket. The system in theory is a good one, right? There's finite resources for police, and you know, you can't be 100 places at once, and it's expensive. So in theory, by having an automated system, it's a way to kind of deal with some of that overflow and keep things safe. And as I said before, by and large, it's generally a pretty good system on the assumption that it's a clear speed. Now, the way that these systems work is if you were to kind of look at the software that the system uses to generate, right? You have basically, it triangulates and measures with intervalometers and whatnot. And there is what's called the kill zone. So there's a little square, there's an invisible square in the computer system, the software, that basically it kind of knows what lane you're in, right? So if I look at the lane here, you can see there's a couple lanes. There's 2 lanes, turning lane on each side. So the way the kill zone works is the cameras are stationary, so it basically draws this invisible square, so it knows generally what lane you're in. The problem is the kill zone is about the size of a car. And the kill zone goes on the assumption that if you are driving within it, that nothing else can actually be in that kill zone, right? It's like, okay, well, it's the size and approximate width and length of a car. Therefore, if something is in that kill zone, it must be the offender in question. It's not always the case, right? Let's say you have a little tiny car or a fairly narrow car, right? And, right, because remember, you don't actually know what that kill zone is. So let's say you're in a smaller car. I'm just throwing a hypothetical out here. Let's say, just as an example, let's say that you have this like you basically are driving a smaller vehicle and you are going right on the threshold. Let's say it's a school zone, and let's say that because I actually happen to be walking into a school zone right now. So let's say that the school zone is somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 10 miles an hour. 10 miles an hour, let's say. 10, 12 miles an hour. So the kill zone, the camera's going to be pointed. You go into this kill zone. It measures you at the side of this. When you go into this kill zone in your vehicle, it's assuming that your vehicle is the only vehicle that is going to be able to fit. Now, let's add another variable. Let's assume that you are going exactly that limit. So let's say that the limit is, we'll say 12 miles an hour, 15 miles an hour. And you're going exactly 15 miles an hour. Now let's say there's some freaking moron, okay, that decides that they are going to, they're tailgating you and they're right up your ass, and you are trying to just kind of maintain your speed, and then they basically get right up your ass, and then they decide to try and pass you and swerve. And they get really close and they're driving really dangerously, and they are speeding. They're going, you know, 5, 10, they're going maybe another 5, even 10 miles an hour over the speed limit. Well, guess what? If they're driving dangerously and they get close to you, if they get close enough to you, that vehicle is actually going to get into that kill zone. And the problem with that is, guess what? If that vehicle gets into your kill zone that the camera is looking at, it doesn't know that there's 2 vehicles in there. right? It's assuming that anything in that kill zone can only fit one vehicle. It's not accounting for the possibility of somebody else driving like an idiot. Now, it's not super common, but it's also not entirely unheard of. Just don't mind me, I'm just gonna cross here. So it's not entirely unheard of. It's not super common, but it's also not super rare. So now, if some asshole decides that they're gonna cut you off, you now get a ticket for $100, $200, $300, or whatever it is. God help you when you get in front of a judge or a justice of the peace, or, you know, whatever regulatory power that be, that you need to kind of sit there and argue that, hey, I wasn't speeding, right? Because the first thing that they're going to do is they're going to turn around and they're going to say, well, the camera clocked you at 10 over or 15 over or 20 over. Oh, well, I wasn't in there. You know what I mean? Now, you could say, we'll throw another variable at this. You could turn around and say, if you wanted to, oh, well, there was another vehicle, and you could say, well, if that were the case, then wouldn't they be in the picture too? Well, not necessarily, right? Because the system is focused on the kill zone. So there's going to be a very slight delay over when you're speeding, when the system calculates the speed that it thinks that you're at and the picture. And that could be a couple hundredths of a second. So as a general rule, a lot of these systems are operating, like their shutter speed is usually at about 1/60, 1/80th of a second. Some of them are more than that, some of them are less. But be that as it may, be that as it may, this guy, I thought he was going to try and cut me off. Yeah, on camera that would go over real well. Anyway, so be that as it may, you're not necessarily going to have that on camera, right? Because regardless, there is always going to be a very slight delay between, right? Because the computer has to calculate. You have to speed. It has to analyze, the computer has to analyze the information from the camera that it is in fact within the kill zone. And then it has to process that calculation. Then it needs to take a picture and send that in. Now you could say, well, okay, so let's say there's no picture, there's no evidence. Well, how can you argue that? Well, it's going to be hard for people to argue it because most people don't know this, right? So then people go in and they are sort of befuddled, and they go in and they just say, okay, well, I guess I'll pay the ticket. Now, I am pro law enforcement, and I would say that the majority of cases where people are speeding, including those with the cameras, are generally correct, because most people are not going a couple of miles over the speed limit. Most people that I see, and most of the police officers that I know and have worked with, and both socially and professionally, and media work and friends and colleagues, will tell you that most of the time when somebody is speeding, they're just blowing right past, right? So I'm not actually sitting here and saying that you should fight a ticket every single time. But what I am trying to get over here is that the system isn't perfect, right? The system is not perfect, and it sometimes makes mistakes. So there are going to be cases where, you know, there are going to be cases where if you are in fact just driving along and you're only going, and you're going exactly at the speed limit, and somebody is driving like an idiot behind you, it is possible for you to get a ticket for speeding when you weren't actually speeding. And just to kind of speak more to the point that the systems aren't perfect. There have been lots of lawsuits and things like that, you know, but what are you supposed to do? Walk around with a GoPro on your dash all the time? You have to have a degree in electrical engineering. You have to have a law degree. right? I have a saying, right? Because that is that generally systems of all types, particularly in official capacity, work more than they don't. It doesn't necessarily mean, and absolutely does not mean, that they work all the time, because they don't. And I think it's important for people to know this about the system. In fact, I am gonna say that because of the way that these systems calculate, it is and people have beaten tickets by arguing this. So, and I have. I also was sent a ticket in the mail when I wasn't speeding, and that's why in most places when you get a photo ticket, it doesn't affect your insurance premiums even if you pay it, right? Because they know that they can't prove it. And I went to traffic court and I basically turned around and said, listen, this system has not been calibrated properly, because it's not possible to basically have been speeding in this particular case. And the funny thing is, and the ticket was thrown out, I didn't have to pay it. And here's the best part. Not only did I not have to pay the ticket, I didn't even get the chance to bring my main argument, is that they were saying I was clocked for going over the speed limit on a road that I wasn't even driving on. You know what I mean? So I could understand it if, so basically the system's saying you were driving on Broad Street, which I wasn't even driving on because there was no camera on that street. It turned onto the street with the camera, and that would be one hell of a hairpin turn in order to get that. So I have a perfect driving abstract. I've never had a ticket. I'm a pretty good driver, I think. And you know, and I knew I wasn't speeding. So I went and I said, hey, listen, this is the deal. And they said, yeah, you're right. We were throwing out this ticket. So just something to think about in terms of traffic tickets. You know, I'm not saying go and fight every single one, because honestly, if you're driving like an idiot, you shouldn't be on the road. Drive safely. Remember, you're driving a big hunk of metal that's at least this big hunk of metal that you're driving is going to be at least a half a ton. That's a lot of metal. That's going 40, 50, 60, 70 miles an hour. That's a weapon. So if you're gonna drive safely. Don't drive like a fucking moron. And if you're going 30 or 40 or 50 miles or whatever it is over the speed limit, you get a speeding ticket, I don't think you should get off. I think you should be nailed to the wall. Just out of the principle of the thing, right? Because you're endangering other people on the road. And this to me is something that really bugs me. But if some asshole's driving like an idiot around you, they should be getting the ticket, not you. And so this is just something to sort of keep in mind. So if this was entertaining for you and possibly helped you out of the bind, please do subscribe. And I do intend to, while I'm stuck in Ottawa, doing these little, shall we say, video vlog things or whatever, live streams, because they're fun to do and bandwidth is cheap. And if there's anything that we've learned about the internet, is that there's entirely too much space and that there's plenty of room for things that really are a complete waste of time. So I don't necessarily have to feel guilty about adding an additional dumping ground with my verbal diarrhea that may or may not have or provide any sort of entertainment, usefulness, information, or whatever. So I leave you with this, a shameless plug to ask you to subscribe to this channel. And on top of that, to remind you that Go Nitro starting next week at 4:30 Eastern Time on Thursdays, every Thursday. We renegotiated our broadcast deals. So what that means to you, fair viewer, is that you can now watch Go Nitro for free if you don't happen to get Go Nitro on TV in your area. So if you don't happen to live in Las Vegas and you don't have the ability to watch Go Nitro on Fox 5 or Silver State Network, or you don't happen to live in Rochester, New York, and you don't have the ability to tune into Go Nitro on Fox Rochester, or you don't happen to live in Jackson, Tennessee, or Nashville, Tennessee, and do not have the ability to watch Go Nitro on the stations run by our friends at WBBJ and NBC Nashville respectively, you can now watch it online for free. So please do subscribe, because free is good. See this thing up here? This, I don't know how well you can see it, this is a traffic camera. So there's a camera here, and then if we go over here, I don't know if you can see this, this is the flash. So here's the way, in theory, this is supposed to work. If you drive like a complete frickin' moron, the idea is that the camera will take a picture of your plate, and that, I need to cross the street here, that it will take a picture of your plate and have this wonderful handy dandy flash that will make sure that your plate can be seen on the camera, and then the plate is scanned and gone through a database, and then you get a nice big fat ticket in the mail. Now, the thing about these ticket systems, or these camera systems, is the idea that they're supposedly foolproof. Hang on, I can't, oh, there's a tree in the way, so I cannot actually see that I'm able to